Hey there, sure or unsure whether you're autistic or not individuals. In today's video, I'm going to explain the somewhat confusing DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for autism. I'm going to explain it from the point of view of high-functioning autism. So let's begin. To meet the diagnostic criteria, a child or a person must have persistent deficits in each of three areas of social communication and interaction, plus at least two of four types of restricted repetitive behaviors. So there are 5 sections, and section A is mandatory. So let's explore it. Persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by the following currently or by history. Examples are illustrative, not exhaustive. See text. First one is deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging, for example, from a normal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation to reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affect to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. The first one is pretty clear, I guess. It can be explained in simple terms as being awkward in social situations. This could range from initiating or following a conversation, directing the topic to your special interests, lacking emotional reciprocity, misunderstanding the emotions of the other person, or even the inability to connect to the other person in a conversation. Moving on to number 2, deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, ranging, for example, from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures to a total lack of facial expressions and nonverbal communication. The second point is being unable to read social cues said in simple language. Expressions and body language takes a while to get used to for an autistic person, and some may never understand them. Also, autistic individuals tend to take things literally, and it can be very confusing when someone uses language rhetorically. Eye contact is a symptom very often misinterpreted by specialists because it does not necessarily mean lack of any. It can mean the total opposite: too much eye contact, staring at somebody, making them uncomfortable. So, moving on to number 3 of the mandatory criteria. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, ranging, for example, from difficulties adjusting behavior to suit various social contexts to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends to absence of interest in peers. The third one is a bit confusing in my opinion. I understand it is difficult to maintain relationships as an autistic person and behave differently in various social contexts. However, many autistic people learn how to do that via masking, although I strongly advise against it. What I also don't agree with is difficulties sharing imaginative play, as this can be very misleading for people on the spectrum. We just have a different imagination compared to neurotypical people. This criterion should be interpreted differently, in my opinion. The last one, I think, is also incorrect, as autistic people not necessarily lack interest in others, but find socializing hard. We've reached section B. Let's see what's the criteria there. Restricted or repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities, as manifested by at least two of the following currently or by history. Examples are illustrative, not exhaustive. See text. First one from this section. Stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech. Example, simple motor stereotypes, lining up toys or flipping objects, echolalia, idiosyncratic phrases. In short, this includes stimming, repetitive movements, and echolalia. I find this point to be quite clear. Number 2. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. Examples: extreme distress at small changes, difficulties with transitions, rigid thinking patterns, greeting rituals, need to take same route or eat same food every day. This one is also pretty self-explanatory. Number 3. Highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. Examples: strong attachment to or preoccupation with unusual objects, excessively circumscribed or perseverative interest. This one is kind of offensive for autistic people. Instead, they should have used special interests. And some autistic individuals can greatly advance in their field of interest. Mozart is a good example. Would you say he had highly fixated or restricted interest that was abnormal in intensity or focus? Or would you maybe consider he was a genius? Number 4. Hyper or hyperactivity to sensory input or unusual interests in sensory aspects of the environment. Examples: apparent indifference to pain, temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. Yep, this is a clear one as well. Hyper or hyposensitivity to smell, taste, sight, touch, or sound. This, and number 2, insistence on sameness and routine, are the most common causes for my meltdowns. Next is section C. Symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities or may be masked by learned strategies in later life. This simply means that symptoms appear in childhood, but may show up when a situation is distressing enough for the autistic kid. They're usually pretty obvious if parents and doctors know what to look for. Now, section D follows with symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. This one is a bummer. A lot of autistic children go undiagnosed if they perform well academically, or if, for example, the class teacher is okay with their quirky behavior. This was the case with me and my primary school teacher. She actually loved me and she allowed me to behave in very weird ways compared to other kids. She allowed me to stay always at the back desk and drawing all the time in every single class. She also protected me from the bullies at school. In the kindergarten, though, the lady who was, I guess, the teacher there spoke with my parents that I might have a developmental delay, and my mother was just offended and they put me in another kindergarten because of that. So this was the first red flag missed by my parents. And my developmental delay had to do with the lack of communication with other kids and the inability to perform simple tasks like eat by myself or just adhere to any schedule that was there. I also used to cry a lot, wondering when I would be let go and able to go back home. It is very often the case that kids may go unnoticed until they grow up and until they face the next big obstacle. And sadly, pretty often, it's already pretty late for them to get a diagnosis. As getting a diagnosis as an adolescent and then as an adult can be really challenging or impossible for some. Last one is section E. These disturbances are not better explained by intellectual disability, intellectual developmental disorder, or global developmental delay. Intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder frequently co-occur. To make comorbid diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disability, social communication should be below that expected for general developmental level. This one is relevant to more severe cases of autism in my opinion, so I'm not gonna cover it in this video. At the end, after all the criteria, there is a note. Individuals with a well-established DSM-4 diagnosis of autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, or pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified should be given the diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder. Individuals who have marked deficits in social communication but whose symptoms do not otherwise meet the criteria for autism spectrum disorder should be evaluated for social pragmatic communication disorder. This one is pretty clear in my opinion. In case only communication difficulties are present and other symptoms such as stims, sameness and inflexibility, special interests, and hyper or hyposensitivity are lacking, specialists are going to look into social pragmatic communication disorder instead. This is it. The DSM-5 criteria explained and clarified from the perspective of a high-functioning autistic individual. That's me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and my company. Stay tuned, and until then, may peace be with you all. Also, autistic individuals tend to take things think. So in general, kids may grow up unnoticed until they reach the next obstacle, but it is very often the case then that it is too late. This is it. The DSM-5 criteria explained. This is it. The DSM-5 criteria explained and clarified.